Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome in to GC Live. Kendall Smith joined alongside of Wes Mitchell. Wes, I was bumping
I was
to
about to
that
say, you
intro.
liked that intro, didn't you, Kendall?
I
I
am
wish the
totally
people
here
could
for
have
it.
seen you.
I was like, hands up in the air. I don't even care. I'm having a party today. It's a Monday, but the Gamecocks won, so everyone's in a great mood as we kick off this work week. But yeah, I haven't been on GC Live in a hot minute. It's been quite a while. So I haven't seen the new intro. So I guess that's bad because I'm admitting that I haven't watched GC Live.
Here's the thing, Kendall. You used to watch, you used to hop into the comments, you used to randomly pop in. No more for whatever reason. But you were giving me a little bit of grief saying that you had not been on GC Live in a long time. And I started to think about it. I was like, dang, for once in her life, Kendall is right. And then Chris said he couldn't do the show today, so I was like, you know what, this makes sense. We'll get Kendall in, and here we are, South Carolina, Mississippi State review show like we do every Monday. Gamecocks winning 37-30. As always, GC Live brought to you by Clint Hammond, Movement Mortgage, clint.hammond.com, 803-771-6933. Kendall, maybe one day you move back to Columbia. Maybe one day we see you more than once every 3 months. And when you do, you'll call Clint Hammond like everyone else at 803-771-6933, and he will get you a great interest rate on a mortgage. So anyone else that's already ready to make the move, call Clint. Again, 803-771-6933.
Yeah, we appreciate our great friend Clint Hammond at Movement Mortgage. Hello, Greg. It's good to see you again. It's good to see everybody again. I was actually in Columbia this past weekend, got to ride on Wes Mitchell's coattails a little bit when it came to tailgating. I haven't done a tailgate, haven't done the full football experience since my freshman year of college. So back in 2019, that was the last time that I sat in the stands at Williams-Brice Stadium. Got to do it this past weekend. Watched South Carolina defeat Mississippi State by a final score of 37-30. And Wes, like you said, that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm here filling in for Chris Clark. I think he's in Nashville, Tennessee, just living his best life right now. I don't want to expose everything that Chris is doing, but he put it somewhere. So it's out there.
I think that's right.
Yeah, it's a known thing. So Chris is over in Nashville having a blast, but we're going to break down everything that went on this past weekend for South Carolina. I want to start broadly, Wes, and then we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty and the details of what happened against Mississippi State. But obviously a huge win for South Carolina. We hate to use the term must win, but you kind of feel like this game was a must win for South Carolina because you head into Tennessee this week. That's obviously a tough game. The dominoes could start falling in a bad way if you're the Gamecocks and you don't win against Mississippi State. So what were your overall thoughts on the Gamecocks win this past weekend, Wes?
Yeah, I think definitely a need to win, and obviously you have no fan wants to start 1-3, and you can sit there and say, look, top 25 opponent in Charlotte against North Carolina. That ended up being a tough matchup. I think obviously for South Carolina at Georgia, number one team in the country, that's tough. And then you sandwich in Furman. You can kind of explain away those two losses, but I think a team you were favored against at home, capacity crowd, you got parents everywhere too for Parents Weekend. Like, this was an opportunity to kind of showcase your program. And frankly, you start looking at their schedule. There's so many difficult games on this list, Kendall. I feel like you got to take advantage. Not that Mississippi State's some awful team. They're obviously an SEC team. They were up to the challenge to kind of hang with South Carolina for much of the night. But you got to take advantage of those chances to kind of rack up wins. And South Carolina did that. I thought it was a little bit closer maybe than it even could have been. I don't know about you, Kendall, but watching the game, I felt like South Carolina was kind of like in control for most of the game, but then they just couldn't quite put Mississippi State away. Like they go up 14-0 right off the bat. And I'm like, if Mississippi State turns the ball over here and South Carolina gets the ball back, like a big play, then they may just put them away and blow them out. Like I felt like they were teetering on the edge, but instead Mississippi State hits one of their many deep passes in this game and cuts it to 14-7, bounce back. Ultimately, they tie it up 14-14. South Carolina then, at some point they go back up 2 scores, but Mississippi State ties it up again. It was all, Mississippi State was never in control of the game, but South Carolina never put it away either. And so that meant Carolina had to execute in the second half. They had to go out and make some plays with a little bit of pressure on them sort of late in the game, and they did. So Beamer seemed pretty happy overall with the performance. I think he said it took some years off of his life. I think some Gamecock fans felt that way too. But you take SEC wins where you can get them. You kind of reset things right now. You're 2-2 going into Tennessee. Once again, a game that this time you're not the favorite. You were the favorite against Mississippi State, but also a winnable game. So we got all week to talk about Tennessee, but you look at these next few games in general, Tennessee, Florida, Missouri, they're all top 25 teams. So these are all toss-ups. These are all games you could win or lose, which made it really, really important to take care of Mississippi State on Saturday night in front of what was an awesome atmosphere.
Wes, I agree with you. I feel like South Carolina did have control throughout most of the game. Obviously, you talked about it there, but Mississippi State was able to keep it close, obviously tie it up at certain points during the game. But being there myself, there was never really a moment where I was like, okay, I think that this is going to go downhill. I think South Carolina is going to give up this lead. I think that Mississippi State's going to take a lead. I never really felt that way for whatever reason. It just felt like South Carolina was leading the charge. And I think so much of that had to do with Spencer Rattler. This is something I got major heat for on Twitter from certain fan bases across the SEC and across the country. But I tweeted out after that game that Spencer Rattler is the best quarterback in the SEC. This is something we can get into, but I want to talk about his stats just a little bit here before you and I kind of dive deeper into what Spencer has done throughout the season and what he did last game. But he threw more touchdowns than incomplete passes in South Carolina's win over Mississippi State. So you've got that. And then in his last 3 home games, 73 of 84. So he's completed 86.9% of his passes, 1,081 yards, 12 touchdowns, no interceptions. Saw that tweet from Brad Crawford earlier today. It doesn't surprise me when I see those numbers. Obviously, Spencer's doing very well if you watch the Gamecocks, but those numbers are unbelievable. And Spencer played unbelievable on Saturday night. So want to get your thoughts on him and see if you kind of agree with me on the stance of if Spencer is the best quarterback right now in the SEC West.
Kendall, so were the fan bases giving you trouble? Do they have orange in their Twitter headers? Like, were they
the
Tennessee
fans
Clemson, or mainly Tennessee?
So it wasn't a lot of Clemson fans. The Clemson fans did not like the other tweet that I put out where I just said South Carolina won today and Clemson lost today.
Oh, well, I can see why they probably wouldn't like
that tweet, but they didn't respond really as much to my tweet about Spencer. It was some Tennessee fans that were not a big supporter.
I think you need to go back, Kendall, and quote tweet yourself and say, I said what I said, because
I stand on what I said. I do.
Yes. Stand like Jaheim Bell, you need to stand on business here. And so I was listening to Cole Kubelik's podcast on the way over to the radio station today, and I've recently discovered this. He actually has a very, very detailed SEC breakdown that he puts out every Sunday. And Cole was a sideline reporter for the South Carolina game this past weekend. and he will be in Tennessee this coming weekend. So he's kind of dialed into South Carolina athletics, South Carolina football right now. And his take on there was, I'm not sure there's an SEC quarterback playing better than Spencer Rattler. And so he said, he kind of went through the thought exercise, like you have Spencer, you have Jaden Daniels probably in the mix. You have, I think you mentioned Jackson Dart from Ole Miss, at least going into this past weekend, before the Alabama game. There's one other guy he mentioned. I can't remember who he put into the conversation. But essentially, he has Spencer as being kind of the standard. Like you can maybe say there's somebody else up there with him, but there's not really anybody playing above Spencer Rattler right now. So that's not just your, you just graduated from South Carolina homer take. Like I think
It's facts.
It's like, and it's been so consistent, Kendall, that this is how consistent Rattler has been this year, that he at one point, I think he got all the way up to 16 for 16 in the game. I know he was 13 for 13. I think it went all the way up to 16. And most quarterbacks, if they're 16 for 16, you'd be sitting there like, he hadn't missed it. For him, you're at the way he's playing right now, it was almost like expected, because we saw him do that against Furman, where he racked up, I think he had one incompletion in his first however many throws. Georgia, he started 8 for 8 on the first drive, and then I can't remember, 10 for 10, 11 for 11. The Georgia's second half is the one, he was under duress, getting hit, drop passes. But if we're just talking about statistics, that's really the one half this year where the stats have not been on par with the rest of it. But Kendall, every single half other than that, he was 30 for 39 against North Carolina when they were in his face all night long. So the fact he can go, 16 of 18 on Saturday was his final line, right?
I think he may have threw more than that.
Oh, maybe so. I don't
Maybe
know.
a little bit more.
He didn't throw many. I'll check on that.
No, and we'll get into that later. But yeah, it wasn't much more than that. If it was more than that, we don't have the stat sheet right in front of us.
The point being, he's been so accurate all year long, and he's putting the ball where it needs to be. You're not even seeing. Okay, I knew they'd help me out. 18 for 20. So, you're seeing him not put the ball in danger. So, you know how sometimes a quarterback, even if it's not an interception, you'll be like, oh, they got away with one right there. They got away with one right there.
Does those stats too, right? And Spencer has not put a ball in danger in, I don't think he did at all. Obviously not on Saturday night against Mississippi State. He didn't against North Carolina either. Like
the two against Georgia were really
right. And at that point in the game, it's a different situation. But even against North Carolina, the PFF advanced stats where you're looking at, how many times did Spencer Rattler put the ball in danger of potentially being intercepted? And he didn't. And he didn't this past weekend against Mississippi State. And, I think those two incompletions from Spencer Rattler, again, one of them, I think there could have been a pass interference call on. And then the other one, it's not like he's overthrowing guys or underthrowing guys or way off the mark. Like he's putting these balls in positions where they can be caught. And I feel like that is super telling of just how consistent Spencer Rattler has been throughout this entire year. We're going to get into talking about Mario Anderson in just a second. But before we move on from Spencer, this is a question I think some people in the Gamecock fan base are asking Wes. They're seeing a lot of names thrown out there as to who is going to be in the Heisman conversation. You hear the same old names, right? Caleb Williams, Drake May. Spencer Rattler hasn't been mentioned probably as much as Gamecock fans would like to hear it. Want to get your thoughts on that and whether or not you think it's fair, Wes, at this point to have Spencer Rattler in the conversation, and if not, what does he need to do or what needs to happen to get him there?
And I just while you were talking, I tried to pull up some Heisman odds. The leaders here are still really the same people that you would expect. Caleb Williams, still the odds-on favorite, along with Michael Penix Jr. from Washington. Rattler, from what I can see, still nowhere to be found. His numbers, Kendall, are up there with anybody. And I kind of feel like word is starting to get out a little bit about what Spencer is doing in Columbia, because I think people started to kind of write him off last year with the way the first 2/3 of the season went.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like there was quite a bit, at least outside of Columbia, of, he had a few great games. Like, he got hot, had a few great games. I think people that watch this team on the regular, like we do, and the fans in here, they're seeing that he's really done a lot of the same things we saw him do against Tennessee, against Clemson, now multiple games in a row. So, I know it's kind of common for coaches to be like, hey, I'll take my guy over anybody out there, which we've seen Beamer say that about Rattler. Which quarterbacks would you truly take over Spencer Rattler in the entire country right now? Ironically, it's Caleb Williams, who's also from Oklahoma. We know about, the past between those two guys. But, Spencer is playing as well as any quarterback out there, in my opinion. So I think to get into that race, to actually be in the conversation, you're going to have some more big South Carolina wins. Like, if they kind of stay on this pace right now, they're 2-2, and they're kind of fighting for 6 wins, 7 wins, even with the big numbers, it's going to be hard to do. I think you could have the same numbers if you're Spencer Rattler, and you go to Knoxville and beat those guys again. Beat even Florida, not like a national program right now, but they're top 25. You face 3 top 25 teams in the next 3 weeks, but they're kind of beatable top 25 teams, in my opinion. They're not like elite teams right now. So I think the numbers are going to be there, Kendall. Like, he consistently has completed a bunch of passes, put up a bunch of yards. It hasn't been just short passes. You see the long ball to Legette to start the second half. The numbers are going to be there. It's going to be very difficult for him to come this far behind and get even into the real Heisman conversation. But he's also going to need some of these other guys that are the odds-on favorites to kind of fall off a little bit as well. But hey, here's the real question. I feel like if Rattler was doing last year what he's doing right now, when he came into the year last year and still had a good bit of hype around him, I feel like. So a lot of this is just kind of like, too, when preseason polls affect where a team is ranked, even if they haven't done anything yet. Yeah. In his case, the fact that he hasn't been talked about as much in the preseason probably affecting his ability to be in a potential Heisman conversation.
Well, and it is the fact that South Carolina is 2-2, right? Like, that just plays into the equation, as you mentioned. If South Carolina was 4-0, even if they were 3-1, I think there's a different perception surrounding Spencer Rattler and what he's been able to do for South Carolina. But obviously they got exposed a little bit in week 1 against UNC, and then going into Georgia, they kept it close. They were obviously up for a period of time, and then, things didn't finish out the way that South Carolina would have liked for them to. But I think that also plays into it as well. Like, if Spencer Rattler is a quarterback of a team with these numbers that's 4-0 or even 3-1, he's probably having his name thrown out there, at least by some people, for the Heisman conversation. Obviously, winning a Heisman is not everything. I think South Carolina fans are a little bit more interested in the Gamecocks continuing to win games, but it would be really nice to have your quarterback win the most prestigious award in all of college football. So we'll see how things continue to shape out for South Carolina this year. Want to talk a little bit about Xavier Legette. We thought this year it was going to be the Spencer Rattler to Juice Wells connection. Obviously, Juice has been plagued by some injuries, unfortunately, to start off the season, but Xavier freaking Legette is unbelievable. One of the best receivers, in my opinion, right now in college football. The catches he is making are superhuman, insane, unreal, crazy. Wes, what do you got on Xavier Legette and what he's been able to do for the Gamecocks?
Yeah, I mean, Kendall, it's one of those things. You hear about a guy and a great offseason he's having in terms of Legette, but you never quite know how that's going to translate into the real games. And, for Legette, you go back, look, a lot of people remember the SC State game last year, which I thought was kind of the turning point for him to the negative side, and just being able to kind of battle back from maybe that affecting your confidence. And he's kept pushing, kept, kind of stayed the course, had a huge finish to last year. Everybody remembers the great catch in the Gator Bowl, and really just built off of that and has busted his tail all off season. I mean, this is a dude that's been through so much, has lost both of his parents at a young age, has, had to battle through stuff like that. And now is sitting there, I mean, literally is leading the country in receiving yards, and I think is working his way, just flying up the draft boards. And yes, it's a little emoji that everybody overuses.
To the moon.
Yes, to the moon emoji, the stock up emoji.
The rocket ship.
Yes, rocket ship for Legette has left the atmosphere. I feel like he is he's awesome. And I think we all knew he was fast, but when he ran away from Mississippi State's defense on the first drive on that catch and run over the middle, I mean, just seeing a dude that big move that fast against an SEC defense where he's just running away from them. Even the announcers, if y'all go back, if you were at the game, go back and listen to the call of that. They're literally just like, oh my God, like this guy just exploded out of his stance. And so, I think for him, the team or the NFL teams, they're going to say, all right, he's got the size, he's going to run well, he's making plays down the field as far as jump balls. You're seeing him make plays, run after the catch. What negatives are there to his game? He can kind of do it all. They're even using him in the backfield a little bit or in jet sweeps and stuff like that. So I think he's a top 3 round pick right now. And that's probably conservative based on what he's doing. I think, am I going too far to say he could be a first round pick? I don't know. I feel like I haven't heard that quite yet from like the people who do draft boards and stuff. But with our eyes, what we're seeing, he looks like somebody who should be in the first round conversation.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think if he continues to play the way that he's been playing, that's going to be a no-brainer. And he's been I have so much credit to give to Xavier Legette because I think so much of the conversation coming into the season, like I already said, was Juice Wells. And of course, we know Juice Wells, very, very talented, very good at what he does. But now that he hasn't really been contributing in the way that South Carolina imagined him contributing because of the injuries that he's been facing, it's the next guy up mentality. And not that, it was ever like, oh, Juice Wells is here and Legette's down here. It was never like that. But XL has just stepped up in ways that I think people were not expecting this season. He's been so much fun to watch, lightning fast, just been phenomenal for South Carolina. Very excited to see what he continues to do. Yes, Wes, you got something?
I have some information to provide to the people.
Okay.
Here on GC Live. So, continuing with my theory, Kendall, that the depth chart you see, so South Carolina just put out their new depth chart literally seconds ago. So, my theory, because everybody looks at the depth chart, they say, why aren't there any changes on the depth chart going into a week? Well, the depth chart you're seeing South Carolina put out is actually what you saw the week before. So the depth chart that comes out on Monday is a representation for what we saw on the field this past Saturday. And so not surprising, couple of changes. Running back position, now listed as Mario Anderson or Dacarrion Joyner. So obviously Joyner got the start this past week, but Anderson ended up playing more.
So Mario
Juice,
Anderson's going to get the start this week. I would assume. I'm
you
going
would
to go
think,
out on a
right?
limb and say probably. Obviously, I'm not the coaches, so I don't know for a fact. But when you're getting that or and it's a recent change, you can kind of bet that that newer guy in there will probably get the start. Go ahead, Wes.
They actually did not list Juice on the depth chart this week. Omega Blake, Amarian Brown, Xavier Legette, obviously starter at wide receiver. Offensive line, right guard now listed as Ja'Kai Moore or True Ball. Made last week on the depth chart or not, because I'm not looking at it. Tyshawn Wanamaker or Sidney Fugar listed as right tackle. I think for the most part, everything else remains the same. But I know our people watching and listening like to know what the depth chart says. So once I saw that just came out, wanted to provide the people with the latest information there, Kendall.
He is a breaking news reporter, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Wes Mitchell, for your contributions. We appreciate it.
They sent it to me, so it's not.
He's reading you the information as the true journalist that he is. But in all seriousness, Wes, it is interesting because, you know, you just talked about it there, and it's a great segue into the running back situation. Mario Anderson, I was so impressed with him this weekend. He's a workhorse back there. Like, he is gritty. He is working for every extra yard for South Carolina. He's one of those guys that pushed his way into the situation, and he, you know, did really well this past weekend. So I would imagine that this week he'll probably get the start for South Carolina. Again, it said Dacarrion Joyner or Mario Anderson. Again, usually when you have that or situation and it's a new guy being thrown in there on the depth chart, then it's probably going to be the newer person. In this case, that would be Mario Anderson. So, Wes, how do you think Mario did against Mississippi State this past weekend?
Yeah, you know, and I think if we're going to talk about Mario, we got to talk O-line as well. You know, I thought it was one of their better games, certainly in the running game. I thought they protected Spencer pretty well, too, for the most part. And it felt to me like South Carolina said, we are going to work on our running game today. And that's that. Like, this is our goal, is to sort of bring along the running game. I think they probably could have even scored more points if they had just put the game on Rattler. There's a lot of first down runs. There were people, I don't know about where you were sitting, Kendall, but where I was sitting, there's people around me, throw the ball,
Yes.
throw the ball. And I kept my mouth shut, but I wanted to turn around and say they are clearly trying to work on the running game because they know they have got to develop some semblance of a rushing attack if they're going to be the team they want to be this year. And so I think they probably had I think it was a big picture game plan as opposed to a just win this game plan. I thought Georgia was more of a, hey, we got to do everything we can to try to knock off the defending two-time champ. This game, I felt like we feel like we're going to win the game. We've got to work on some things. Much like, go back to the Furman game, they were only up 20 when they went ahead and started putting people in off the bench. And there were people going, wow, they're pulling Rattler already. And I think it's because they knew they need to work some of these other guys in. They needed to build depth. So to me, and then you hear Beamer say in the post game, like, hey, we cut our run game down to about 5 plays. We wanted to just rep them and work them. Now that can sometimes get you beat. There was a couple of times the game got tight again, and I was kind of, I'm kind of like, all right,
right,
you can work on these things, but you also have to go win the game. But I thought there was a huge amount of trust from Beamer with his team, like a huge amount of trust in his team that they were going to execute and get the job done. Mario Anderson obviously brought just a little additional element to that. Even with that said, Kendall, I thought there were a couple of runs where he tripped and he probably could have tacked on another 35 yards maybe to to his total, to his tally there, but this was a good starting point for progress from the offensive line. I think Big Tree has been really good. Trovon Ball got to play a bunch. Gargiulo has been great this year, really. And so I think you're seeing progress. And we talked about Spencer Rattler for about 20 minutes earlier. So take what Spencer has done, what Legette has done, and just imagine if they can bring along the running game just incrementally.
Yeah.
And then maybe even if you get Juice back in there at some point too. And, and this without a Marion Brown too, who I think is an underrated aspect to all this. So you can kind of see what they're going for. Keep building the running game. It doesn't have to be great, but it can't be nothing like it was against UNC and Georgia. It's got to just come along a little bit. So I think that was the goal on Saturday. I think progress was made. And what a celebration on that 9-yard toss play run into the end zone where they scored the touchdown that put them up by 10. Like, I felt like that was just a cool moment for an offensive line and running back who has kind of just been almost like trying to break through the wall for most of the season.
Yeah, I think, it's good if you're South Carolina, because last year we were both in this together. We both covered South Carolina as we are this year. And it was a lot of the same stuff that we talked about week after week after week. You're talking about the play calling, talking about the offensive line. Of course, we're going to talk about the offensive line every week. We're going to talk about Spencer Rattler every week. But what I'm saying is last year it was like, all right, it's the same thing every week, and it's the same problems that we're talking about, and we're not seeing much improvement. We didn't see that improvement until the Tennessee game, and then obviously the Clemson game, so on and so forth. This year, I feel like you are seeing improvements from week to week with the offensive line. And South Carolina was exposed against UNC in that first game of the season. They know they had to do something about it, so they've done something about it. And you're seeing those tangible, visible, okay, this is getting better. And that's really encouraging if you're a South Carolina fan. Trovon Ball has been great. Tree Babalade has been fantastic. Those are two true freshman players for South Carolina. First experience playing in the SEC, and they are playing far above expectations. They're doing a fantastic job. So you have to tip your cap to those two. I think the offensive line as a whole has gotten so much better over these last couple of weeks, and that's really, really good. Now, from my perspective, I know what Shane Beamer is saying, right? Like, you need to establish a run game. You need to make sure that that's squared away. You're feeling confident about it as you head into these next few weeks, because your opponents are not getting any easier if you're the Gamecocks. What I don't understand, and I think some people might agree with this, Spencer Rattler threw the ball 20 times. And yes, you need to establish your run game, but I also think that you should put maybe a little bit more of that game, especially when it's tight, on the shoulders of your 5-star quarterback who has been phenomenal over these past few weeks. Wes, agree, disagree? I know we already talked about it a little bit. Again, you want to wrap it out with the run game, but maybe a little bit more for Spencer Rattler. Do you feel like he maybe didn't throw as much as you would have liked to have seen against Mississippi State?
So what I'm hearing, Kendall, is you were one of those people yelling, throw the ball from the stands too. That's exactly.
I meant that like one time.
No, okay, all right, yeah, all right.
I felt like South Carolina was in control throughout that game. No matter what the score was, whether it was tied, whether they were up, I was like, I think they're going to win this game. I wasn't ever freaking out about it. But there were times where I was like, I feel like Spencer hasn't thrown the ball that much. And in a tighter game like this, I'm not a football coach. I'm not claiming to be a football coach. I'm not going to be a couch coach. I would just like to hear your thoughts, Wes. Do you feel like maybe they didn't utilize Spencer and his abilities as a 5-star quarterback, knowing how talented he is, and that maybe it was a little bit more running focused than you would have personally liked? This is just an opinion question, and sound off in the comments. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, no, I think they probably would have put up more points if they had put it a little more on 7, put it on his shoulders. There are a couple of first down runs where I was like, all right, guys, let's throw the ball on first down and then come back to the running game a little bit. As efficient as Spencer was, I felt like there was very little chance of putting yourself in a 2nd and 10. Like, he was completing so many passes, you were probably going to get something positive on first down and then come back to the run. But I think there's two different conversations here. To maybe put up more points in this game, yeah, you probably put it on 7, but I really truly believe they felt like they were going to win the game. I think they felt like they were in control, and I think they wanted to develop. Travis called it earlier. I thought it was a good way of saying it. He said running the ball is an attitude. I think they just said, we're going to try to establish this attitude. And I think the hope, Kendall, is maybe this is something that helps you next week, that helps you the week after, that you can lean on moving forward. Now, if they had gotten behind at any point in this game, I think all bets are off. It's back to the 7-17 show. And you can debate in a perfect world, you go ahead and get up by 3 scores, hopefully, and then you just kind of work on all that. But I will say this also, schematically, Mississippi State, they were playing their safeties back, trying to keep everything. If you listen to the TV copy too, Greg McElroy was talking about this. They're playing zone. They're keeping their guys back. They're almost daring South Carolina to run the ball. And they still, honestly, Kendall, the running game was better. It wasn't what you want to see.
I mean, and again, I'm not sitting here saying like, well, South Carolina should never run the ball, put it all on.
But it wasn't what you need it to be. Like, the longest run by a running back by Mario Anderson was 9 yards. So, Spencer had a couple of explosive runs, but it's still a work in progress is what Dow Loggins has called it in the past. I think it's still very much a work in progress, but at least there was some progress, and it's not the lack of progress. And I don't know if you caught this. Beamer said they had no negative runs in the running game. So I thought that was progress as well, because what Rattler can do. So just not putting him in 2nd and 13, that's a huge win. Like, 2nd and 10 is obviously not ideal, but avoiding being in 2nd and 13, 3rd and 15, all those things, is a big deal as well. So I'll be very curious to see moving forward how they kind of operate this offense. I think, like, next week at Tennessee, it probably shifts back to being a little bit more on Spencer Rattler, where you're going to throw the ball more. But maybe in a perfect world, Kendall, there's some balance between the heavy run shift we saw this past week and the North Carolina, Georgia, just you got to throw it every single time to have a chance thing. I saw a stat from this guy, Stato War, Parker Fleming, on Twitter, and it goes like very deep. But going into this game, basically, South Carolina runs the ball more, or throws the ball more, not just by total number, but in a situation. Let's say it's 3rd and 2. By statistics, how many times does an average team run or throw in that position? Whether, or, if it's 1st and 10, what's the percentages of run versus throw? Well, South Carolina is skewed towards the pass more than every team, but I think 8 other teams in the country. So going into this game, so they're throwing it more in like every situation than anybody. So I think they're kind of trying to ease it back in to find some level of balance. But ultimately, it's going to be, if they're going to win these coming games against top 25 opponents, make no mistake, I think it's going to be on the shoulders of Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, and like you said, in a perfect world, you do find that balance if you're South Carolina. But, you see what Shane Beamer is saying. You want to wrap it out with the run game, and that was an opportunity to do it. I think for some people, they might have seen the score and thought, okay, this is a little close, a little too close for comfort. Maybe we want to put this on Spencer Rattler just a little bit more, especially considering he was so hot on Saturday night and so consistent, was hardly, missing a pass. So I think that was the question for some people. But as we continue to get into the coming weeks, you have to have that balance if you're going to continue to win in the SEC. I think that rounds it out for offense. Let's switch it out to defense, unless you have any final thoughts. But before we do, Wes, we want to give a little shout out to one of our lovely sponsors here on GC Live.
Yeah, our friends at Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/GamecockCentral / Gamecocks. That would be Gamecock Central would be cool too, but /Gamecocks. Bird Dogs, a fairly new sponsor here on GC Live, but Kendall, they have the best feeling, most comfortable polo shirts that I have literally ever worn. So check them out. They're known for their shorts, which they've got the shorts that have like a gym short liner, but they're khakis on the outside. So that's what they're known for. Those are cool too. Love those. But I'm telling y'all, something about these polo shirts they have are just, I don't know, it's off the charts. Go to birddogs.com, use the promo code Gamecocks, and right now you're going to get, if you make a purchase, you're going to get a free hydro flask style water bottle. How about that? So use promo code Gamecocks, and shout out to Bird Dogs for being a supporting sponsor here on GC Live, and also a supporting sponsor of several other podcasts on the On3 network. But Kendall, you want to talk some defense now?
Let's talk some defense. Huge shout out to Bird Dogs. It seems like some people in the comment section like them as well. So I'm going to keep that in mind. Early Christmas present thoughts for my brother, for my dad, because you can never get too ahead on that. I am the one on December 22nd running to the mall. I have no idea what I'm doing, no idea what I'm getting. I'm just throwing stuff together at the last minute. So thank you for that idea, and thank you to Bird Dogs for being a supporting sponsor here on GC Live. But want to talk about defense a little bit here, Wes. Obviously, we spent about 40 minutes talking about the offense for South Carolina. It's so easy when you have so much to talk about. But I think the main thing I kind of came away with from the defense this past weekend is that when Mississippi State scored, when Mississippi State had their big moments on offense, it's not like they were sustaining these drives where they were like slowly going down the field and you're like, all right, like they're chipping away at it. It was these long balls, these explosive plays, these deep passes that Mississippi State was calling and completing, and that's ultimately what led to a lot of their scores. And I think that kind of brings up a question with the secondary for South Carolina, maybe a little bit of a cause for concern. Where is your concern level with that, Wes, especially after what we saw giving up a couple of those deep balls this past weekend, which you just cannot continue to have in SEC play if you're South Carolina?
Yeah, I think it is a concern. I do think some of this is fixable. I thought 5 for Mississippi State. I mean, that
He's
dude
got a
was
single game record for Mississippi State.
He was impressive. But he was fast, Kendall. That dude was hauling. If I was Mississippi State, I would have thrown the ball to that guy 15 times. Like, I promise you, if Steve Spurrier was running that offense, that dude would have set the record for targets towards him as well, because they would have just been firing it at him over and over and over. I would never have gone away from him, because he was really the one guy that South Carolina just did not have an answer for. We can't, I think it's one of those things, almost like when you talk about a scrimmage, offense did well, but the defense did bad. I was like, man, the defense stopped the run better than we have seen them stop the run. Honestly, I feel like in 3 years. Like, it was like Mississippi State got nothing out of the running game. And that was my concern coming in. Woody Marks, Mississippi State's running back, he's really good. was the SEC's leading rusher through 3 games coming in, and Mississippi State has kind of prided themselves on running the football. So if you had asked me, like, leading into the game, how's this thing going to play out? I thought Spencer Rattler would have a big game, and I thought Mississippi State would try to run the football, limit possessions, sort of run the clock, and try to kind of eke one out. Well, they went back to the Leach throw the ball almost 50 times days. And, Will Rogers, I thought, looked really good. He looked comfortable. He was completing passes. They looked much more on the same page in the passing game than they had been prior, kind of leading into this game. So, yeah, I don't think you can completely gloss over it if you're South Carolina either and just say that's not an issue. Anytime a team is hitting that many deep passes on you, that is an issue. That's a problem. You got to go back and adjust. And I do think when you look at, everybody saw it. 5 got the better of DQ Smith several times in coverage. Sometimes that's because a safety is supposed to be over top and they're not there. Sometimes that's just a one-on-one win. I do think Carolina is missing the depth that they had at cornerback last year, because if you look at last season when they faced like Tennessee, a team that had really quick receivers and slot receivers that can make you miss like 5 did, they would slide Cam Smith over to the nickelback spot and play 3 cornerbacks. Well, this year they really don't, I guess, have that guy yet that they feel comfortable putting an additional cornerback on the field that doesn't get their best 11 out there necessarily. But I think moving forward, as they keep bringing on these young corners, I do wonder, do you see them have some different packages where you get more of a corner as opposed to a safety at that nickelback spot? Because number 5 was lining up as a slot receiver. Your nickelback is always going to be on top of that guy covering him. So that's something other teams are going to look to do the same, frankly, Kendall, if South Carolina does not clean that up a little bit. So I think it is a concern, but also correctable, for the most part, in my opinion.
Well, and some of these comments are saying South Carolina was finally able to stop the run. That's something that we've harped on time after time after time on GC Live, on Gamecock Central, on 107.5 The Game. We've talked about South Carolina and stopping the run. That has been an issue for South Carolina for quite some time now. You saw drastic improvements this past weekend. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like you might, take your chances and you're like, all right, we're going to line up to really have our best opportunity to stop the run here against Mississippi State and take our chances on the deep ball and kind of see what happens. And I think that's what South Carolina did this past weekend. Obviously, just very, very pleasing for so many Gamecock fans, because you are seeing the defense step up, stop the run this past weekend. They have to continue to do that, obviously, through SEC play. But who are some of those guys on defense, Wes, that you were the most impressed with after this weekend?
Yeah, I thought there were several. Let's throw a shout out to Boogie Huntley. Spencer Rattler and Boogie Huntley both taking home SEC honors this week. That's 1 week after, TJ Sanders got SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week last week. Rattler, I think, got SEC Offensive Player of the Week the week before. And so this week, Rattler gets co-SEC Offensive Player of the Week. Boogie gets Defensive Lineman of the Week. And, so Boogie I thought was great. TJ Sanders continues to make plays. Jordan Strong with the big forced fumble there on the sack. I thought that Strong started to look like the guy that he was pre-injury, honestly. Let's see who else. I thought Marcellus Dial, actually, for them to, as many passes they hit, it wasn't necessarily against the corners for most of the night. I thought both corners held up pretty well. And if we're going to, I think some people were kind of hard on Stone Blanton for his performance at Georgia. So if we're going to bring that energy there, I think we got to bring the same energy to say Stone had one of his better games at South Carolina against Mississippi State, was all over the place, making plays, He had a huge forced fumble that could have really changed the game. When Mississippi State had the ball down about to score, Mississippi State recovered it. South Carolina nearly did. But it was a beautiful forced fumble. So I thought Stone Blanton really had a great game, Kendall. And overall, there were some things to like about the defensive effort if you can just clean up some of those deep balls. And, I think for them, just seeing them stop the run the way they did is something you can build from moving forward, and we'll see how they do that. I want to see more of JT Gear. He made his debut. He only played about 7 snaps because he's still, I think he kind of tweaked his whatever that injury is, foot, ankle, leg, whatever it is. But in his little bit of time in there, he batted a pass down, looked kind of disruptive. I think Gear, if he could get 100%, can help this team as well. Several guys played well. David Spalding didn't play a bunch of snaps, but he obviously had the interception that was huge as well.
Yeah, and so many of the names, that we've brought up throughout our show today, whether it's Tree Babalade or Trovon Ball or Stone Blanton, you saw Judge Collier in there as well from time to time. Like, these are such young players, Wes, and I think that's a hard thing to remember, and it's kind of a hard thing to use as an excuse. And of course, you don't want to use anything as an excuse, but you think about these guys and they have, little to no experience playing in the SEC and playing at South Carolina, and they're being put out there in these big time situations. And I think the way that a lot of them have responded has been very impressive. Obviously, there are things to clean up in every aspect of South Carolina's game. And quite frankly, in every aspect of every team's game across the country right now. You're still very early on in the season, but you have to be proud of the way that a lot of these younger guys have stepped up to the plate and performed for South Carolina so far, because it's really not easy. And we don't want to sit here, if South Carolina loses a game and say, oh, remember, a lot of these players are young. Like, you don't want to put everything on that, but that's something you do have to consider as you continue to watch South Carolina play. But we're getting to the hour mark here, Wes. Want to finish off with a couple of questions for you, maybe not so much about this past weekend, but just about the football world in general. So South Carolina taking on Tennessee this weekend.
I have no idea where she's going with this, by the way.
In Rocky Top, he really has no idea. What are the odds, Wes? Let's hope this doesn't happen, because I'll be on the sidelines and I'll be running for my life. That mustard bottles, golf balls, any kind of item is flying from the stands onto the field, because there is major beef between South Carolina and Tennessee, specifically on the Tennessee side. We already talked about it on Twitter. The Tennessee fans love to go full force at my account, Wes's account, Mike Yuba's account, like you name it. They're all in on that. So I know that they're out for blood. They're not happy about what happened last year. Do you think we'll be safe from any of the food items or golf balls or whatever flying from the stands?
Unless Lane Kiffin joins this staff between now and Saturday, I think you're going to be fine, Kendall. Maybe take your umbrella to the sideline just in case, so that if golf balls start flying, you can get under the umbrella. But no, I think you're fine. I think you're good. I'm going to hope that Vol's Twitter does not represent all of Tennessee, especially that there's that one guy on there that I'm not even going to give his name the hype. There's that one guy that literally responds to every Gamecock.
He has our notifications on. We live rent-free in this guy's head. He loves us.
That's got to be a bot or something, but I think it's a real person.
No, it's a real person.
I don't know how there's time on the planet. Like, there's not enough time in the day to respond to every tweet, but this guy finds a way. So I don't know.
I'm scared, guys. Like, I'm scared. The last time I was at Tennessee was before the Ole Miss mishap, right? And so I wasn't concerned at all. Now I'm on the sidelines this upcoming weekend. I'm just putting it out there into the world. I'm saying that I'm going to try to avoid it at all costs. My friend, my college roommate, is an engineer, so maybe I'll just take her hard hat with me and call it a day and walk around there. No, I think I could go viral for that. That would probably make ESPN. random girl walks around in a hard hat. Speaking of things that are going viral, my second question for you, Wes, completely off the topic of South Carolina football in every way, shape, and form. You know where I'm going with this.
I have a clue on this one.
This has been the talk of the football world all weekends long. If you know who Alex Earl is, you know Braxton Berrios. They are not even the talk anymore, which is saying something. Taylor Swift was in Kansas City yesterday for the Chiefs game against the Bears, sitting in a suite with Donna Kelsey. She was there to watch Travis Kelsey. Now, anybody watching, I know this is a Gamecocks podcast, but we have to keep up with what's going on in the world of football. Is it legit or is it a publicity stunt? Sound off, Wes. Let us know.
Okay. All right. Let me first of all, let me just admit something here real quick, Kendall. We like to keep it real here, right?
Yes.
I'm just gonna admit, I do not care about pop culture, celebrities. Don't get starstruck. Could not care less about that stuff. But I do listen to the Kelsey Brothers podcast in the car.
New Heights.
And do what?
New Heights. Isn't that the name of it?
Yes. And it is fantastic. So I'm kind of here for it with the Kelsey Brothers in the first place. And so I gotta admit, I've been a little curious to know, is it true or not? Is it real? I think it's real. I don't think it's publicity stunt. I don't think Taylor Swift has to. She doesn't need the NFL crossover audience. Like, she's already the most popular artist in the world right now, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So, I don't know.
I was just
Some
curious.
people don't appreciate our conversation right now, but that's fine. Guess what?
Everyone,
we got an hour. We got an hour GC Live today. We got an hour GC Live Tuesday. We got an hour GC Live Wednesday. We got an hour. So we'll do 7 hours of football this week. We're at the end of the show, so we're going to talk about the biggest story in sports.
It's the biggest story in sports. Like it, hate it, love Taylor Swift, love Travis Kelsey, hate him. Doesn't matter. It's the biggest.
I respect the game. The fact that Travis Kelsey shot his shot is pretty. I mean, it's pretty cool. And hey, I feel like the sports world are kind of like, if you're a football fan, you can even sit there and say, I'm not interested. Most guys that I know are still talking about this, and most of them are literally like, oh, so my wife or my girlfriend is talking about Taylor Swift now, but they're interested too.
Yeah, I think everyone on every level is interested. I mean, my friends, my roommates in college, I used to say, like, all the things that they would say. Thank you, Jamie. We appreciate it. But I used to, say all the things that they would say about football. My one roommate thought that a field down was worth 4 points. Like, this is a group of gals that knew nothing about sports. However, they did know that Taylor Swift was at the Chiefs game yesterday to watch Travis Kelsey. And he did shoot a shot, and she was there. And I think it's hilarious and great and awesome. And it, brings more fans to the sport of football. If anything, you are continuing to grow the brand. Not that football doesn't already have millions and millions and millions and millions of fans, but you're bringing in people like my roommates who otherwise would never watch a football game. Not that anybody cares. Obviously, we have some people on here that are really hating this conversation, but we're just bringing it up for 5 minutes, guys. Just 5 minutes. Enlighten us. Let us discuss the topic. It's not going to make or break anybody's day. It's really not.
Yeah, we can move on, Kendall, but I will say, I won't even say the name, but
Wyatt is, look what he said. My wife went from a Bengals fan to kind of liking the Chiefs.
He said, I've literally never heard a guy talk about Taylor Swift. Then you need to talk to more people, because honestly, I was at tailgates on Saturday, and it was brought up by multiple different groups of people. And then Sunday, I was with a group of literally 10 guys, and it got brought up, and it was a topic of discussion. So it's one of those things where you either are loving it or you're loving to hate it. Like, either way, there's a reaction, as we can tell. But anyway,
Well, we'll put
you
that
can say your piece
conversation
and
to
then move
bed.
on, Kendall.
We'll put the conversation to bed. Don't worry, we got GC Live throughout the rest of the whole week talking all things Gamecocks. And if that isn't enough, we have plenty of Gamecocks coverage over on GamecockCentral.com on all of our social medias at Gamecock Central. So be sure to keep up with all of it and also keep up with your taxes, because don't wait till the last minute. Wes, what you got?
Kendall, you're going to have to do your taxes this year. You're out of college. You're going to have to handle this. And you need to call our friends at Liberty Tax, 803-462-5576. If you're a small business owner, you definitely need to make sure you have a good tax plan. Larry and his tax team have serviced the Midlands for over 15 years now. They're locally owned and operated with a staff of tax professionals that are also probably your neighbors if you live here in the Columbia area. They're trusted locally. They're respected nationally. And guess what? Larry is a massive Gamecock fan as well. So, Kendall, I always like the idea of Gamecock fans supporting other Gamecock fans. And so, hey, if you're looking for someone to do your taxes, someone new, give Larry and his team a call, 803-462-5576.
Not to be confused with Larry the Legend, Wes's dog. But yes, we do love Larry at our friends.
What
Larry.
just happened to our graphics?
Our graphics went away. You were giving a face. But Wes's dog's name is Larry. He's the best. Really quick before we leave, just saw a comment about South Carolina getting a ton of 7 o'clock, 7:30 kicks. Like, we know how this has gone. It's been a thing in the Shane Beamer era. Obviously, for today, South Carolina isn't going to get a game time for next week because they have a bye. What are the odds that South Carolina gets a night game against Florida? I'm saying 90%. 90% chance.
I'm hoping. I like the night games. We'll see. Who does Florida have this week, Kendall? Do you know off the top of your head?
Florida has, I don't know off the top of my head, but I can give you a little. They've had 3 home games in a row, and this week they finally play on the road against Kentucky.
Okay.
So I think it'll be a night game, but that's just because every game is a night game. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, that's the trend, right, for South Carolina. So
I
hope
a
so.
crazy number, like 19 games or something in the Beamer era have been at night. I don't know. I don't have the exact number, but I read it and I was like, that's astounding, but it makes sense. Basically, every game last year seemed to be at night. And even the one game that was supposed to be at noon, where it got changed because of the hurricane to a Thursday night, ended up being
a night game too. Yeah. If I think it will somewhat be dependent on Florida, Kentucky, and South Carolina, Tennessee as well.
Yeah. We'll see how the cookie crumbles, but I always find it interesting because every week Monday rolls around and you see on Gamecock Football's Twitter, 7:30 kickoff, 7:30 kickoff. When I was working every single game, 7:30 games are tough because you're there till like 2 a.m. So I'll be at Tennessee Stadium until 2 a.m. this Saturday, but hopefully it'll be super fun because South Carolina will pull out the win. Obviously, they're the underdogs right now, but on GC Live throughout the rest of the week, we will be talking about all things South Carolina, Tennessee. We just did our little
recap. No Taylor Swift talk.
No Taylor
Swift. Of the week.
We're done for the rest of the week. We did our 5 minutes. We are so sorry to anybody whose day we ruined by talking about Taylor Swift. This is the most sassy I've probably ever been on a GC Live, but graduate college and you're just like, whatever. I'm just going to have fun and talk about Taylor Swift on GC Live. It's a good time. Always a great time with you, Wes. Always a great time with all of our awesome listeners and subscribers that join us here on GC Live every single day. We appreciate each and every one of you. Be sure to listen to Wes every single day on 107.5 The Game, 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock for the GC Gamecock Central Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. He does a great job over there. Had to throw in the sponsor, of course. And then again, at Gamecock Central on social media, Gamecock Central GamecockCentral.com. We will see you guys soon. Thank you for joining us. Have a lovely rest of your Monday, and we'll see you all later.